On behalf of our Humanity and Healthcare team, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome one of our team members, Dr. Erna Snellgrove Clark, to be our speaker tonight. She's going to talk to us a little bit about leadership and a little bit about life and a little bit, I think, about relationships and a few more things. Of course, every time we come together, it is important to acknowledge the territory, the traditional territories where we come together to learn and be with one another. And so I would like to acknowledge the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples who share this land with us and the privilege that we have to be here. Our committee has no specific disclosures or conflict of interest. Erna maybe has a bias towards her own life and leadership style, and she's going to talk to us for the next hour about that. Sorry for the humor there, but and as I mentioned before, please stay on mute and use the chat function to ask questions or make comments. We will be watching it as best we can. And as I mentioned, it is always really nice to have video on and speak with faces. I think I speak up for myself and many others that, you know, there seemed to be a point in October, November where we're starting to think of coming forward and re-emerging from the Zoom world. Well, we're right back into it. And so that connection and seeing faces is really appreciated. And without further ado, I think I will stop sharing my screen and say good evening to Erna. And Erna, I'm going to ask you, the first thing I'm going to ask you is please tell us who you are, a little brief bio of yourself, because your own introduction will be much better than mine, and then followed by what piqued your interest to apply to be Vice Dean of the School of Nursing at Queen's.
Awesome. Okay, my pleasure. Thank you, Damon, and welcome everybody. And I just have to put a plug in that when you have colleagues here from Nova Scotia, from Scotland, from Australia, it totally fills your heart with pride to know that they've come to be part of this conversation. So who am I? Well, I think you all have heard I'm a proud Newfoundlander. That's a given. But I am a person that enjoys healthcare and enjoys working with others. And I'm somebody who really, as I've learned through life, everything I said I wouldn't do, I've done. Good, bad, and indifferent. And I've also found myself take a journey of places I never thought I would go. So my background as a nurse is in obstetrics. My background as a leader has been varied, but I came to Queen's to be me. I came here to do the things that I've always wanted to do that my voice didn't get heard. And if you've lived the life of never being a prophet in your own land, it's kind of what it's like when you've lived somewhere for 29 years. You know, when I moved to Nova Scotia in 1990, and we only went for 1 year, and those 29 years were a long year. When I moved to Nova Scotia, I was a staff nurse in the birth unit. And as I got bored, my husband went to Sable Island, and I thought I need to do something. So I went back to do my master's. And then I went back to do my PhD because I loved research. And as I grew up in that context, I was still learning the staff nurse. And what I found as I was leaving Nova Scotia and before I came here is what we tend to do with people is we forget about their growth. We see the people that we've always seen. We don't see the person that they've become. And I've often used the analogy of an iceberg. You know, what you see of me, for those that know me, besides being an open book, you pretty much think you know who I am, but that's what I give you. There's also the part of me that I keep to me, the bigger part of me, that iceberg that's underneath the water. And I came to Queen's because I've watched leadership for a long time. And I've watched the way people work. And I remember one time when I went to a colleague of mine, Deborah Tamlin, and I was complaining about a director. And she says, "Isn't that awesome? You have figured out who you don't want to be." That was such a beautiful phrase to use with me, because what I enjoy is watching people. What I enjoy is watching how people interact and learn and work together. And I've had an opportunity to take that experience and explore who I want to be. So I moved to Queen's to be person-centered. I moved to Queen's to have a new opportunity. And I moved to Queen's to grow. And I've been gifted with all of those things and then some. Now I got a little bit more than I bargained for, but I'm so thankful for all of that. So Damon, I hope that helps us start it off just a little bit.
Yeah, that's thanks, Erna. So Erna, I've along with many of the other people here, some have known you for years and years and much of your life. Some of us, like me, have just gotten to know you really in the last year and a half or so. We had chatted, Erna, last week when we were touching base about the sort of, you just described about the leader that you didn't want to be. I'm wondering if you could tell us about the leader that you thought you would bring to Queen's, and kind of how sort of start on that journey of what you thought, and then maybe over the hour we'll get to where you are now.
All right. Well, I thought, and as Dad would say, you know what thought done? Thought he done it and he didn't. I thought that if I came to a place and enacted the principles, the virtues that I so firmly believe in, that we would see change. And I have found out that I work with humans and it's not that easy. So when I came here, my goal, there's a TED Talk, I don't know who's seen it. It's called HAIL. This one of the principles that the guy talks about, and some of you have already heard me say that. And HAIL is honesty, authenticity, integrity, and love. And love can be a passionate romantic love, but it also can be a respectfulness. And I thought that if we worked together in that way, if we shared and we were inclusive, that we collaborated with each other and held that respect for one another, that's what leadership is. And I still firmly believe that that's what leadership is, but it's way more than that. And you know, in the beginning of a new job, the first 6 months before COVID, it's a honeymoon phase of people wanting to get to know you and working together. And then things happen, and then things change. And what I thought I came for, I perhaps have a bit of that, but I have way more, and way more in a positive way, which might be a funny thing to say given our current experience in Ontario. But a way, Damon, that has structured who I am and how I want to be when I work with others and support others in that growth.
Thanks, Erna. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to invite others to start sort of asking their questions through the chat, or other team members to jump in. I like reading about people and biographies. I'm not one for fiction. I like a lot of nonfiction. And one of the things I like reading about, whether is challenges and adversity and imperfection, and, you know, reading about others' adversity, and, you know, just kind of following the timeline, Erna, of, you know, arriving, and that you talk about the honeymoon period for the first 6 months. Tell me about when the honeymoon first ended. Yeah, not everything, but can you speak to, or would you speak to it, like a first tension or conflict or challenge that kind of gripped you and said, oh, we're not in Kansas anymore?
So I can perhaps say there were some little things maybe in the beginning, but March of 2020 is when I knew I wasn't in Kansas anymore, because we got a gift of COVID. And, it's really interesting. I had been waiting for this, not knowing I was waiting for this job, moving to Kingston. I don't know about everybody else, but have you ever found that when you do the thing that speaks and sings to your soul, everything in your life blossoms and works for you? Well, that's what coming here did for me. Everything was blossoming, and it was more, way more than I thought it could possibly be. And then COVID hit, and then I thought, I can do this. This is like having a high-risk obstetrical case, and everybody's got to work together. And I carried that for a period of time. And I remember one day sitting here in my office, and for those of you that know me well, I can cry and laugh in the same sentence. And one day sitting here in my office, I was having some tears. And a friend of mine who's on this line today said to me, the thing is about you, Erna, is you have a really deep well. And when your well dries, you're pretty dry, and you got to figure out a way to fill up your well and keep going. And so with that in mind, and the fact that I knew I had a responsibility in a role, I asked for a leadership job. And, normally when I ask for something, I receive it. I just received a little tiny bit more than I bargained for. But then I'm supposed to have that and work with it. So, Damon, when COVID began is when I thought this is more than I could bargain for. But it didn't take me too long to figure out what I needed to fill up that well with, to find that way to be able to keep moving, and to remember that as I live in this world of leadership, as I live in this world of change, that all of us need to replenish ourselves on a daily basis, and how we replenish and fuel one another and within all varies. But whatever that thing is, that's the thing that enables me to keep going, and to remember that this isn't about me. This is about us. And if we work as a collective and we work as a community, then it's not just my well, it's dry, it's everybody else's, and we find that way to keep going. I remember one day, Barbara Crow is here. I called her because I was struggling, and I speak about you and this example, Barb, my love, all the time. When I asked her about something, and she said to me, I hope it's okay, I'm talking about you. I didn't ask for permission, but I'm doing it. She asked me, was my decision-making principled? And if I was principled in my decision-making, then not everybody is going to agree with me, but that is the way that I can move forward in my knowing. And my goodness, I have held that so true to my heart, that is where I'm living. That while I'm okay that everybody doesn't get the same thing, that if the issue is principled, then that's how I take it. And that's how I'm writing my book. And so I'm taking those experiences, and each year is a chapter. And I'm not going to tell you each chapter because I should leave those as a secret. But I think it's that learning process of what is it we think we're looking for, what we receive is not the same. And then how do we work through those adversities to be able to keep leading through that change as a community that's working together.
Awesome. I'm going to open it up to the group that's here. I'm certainly happy to talk to you for the next couple of hours, just you and me, Erna. But we have so many of our colleagues here who I'm sure have questions, comments. And so if somebody wants to raise your hand or unmute and jump in, that would be great. If not, I will continue with more questions. Catherine.
Since everyone's just getting warmed up, I thought I'd ask a question, Erna. And just
Sure.
thinking, I always think, reflecting back on things and what would I do differently. So like if you were here right now thinking on sort of your Halifax Erna, what would you tell yourself, knowing what you know now, as you made this decision and sort of as you were preparing to step into this role?
Probably nothing different than I already told myself then. So, you know how people talk about having imposter syndrome? I don't get that at all. So I talk about my dad a lot, and my dad just recently died. And so he's really with me today. So if I use his analogy, please bear with me. But my dad told me that I could do anything. And whether that makes me a little cocky or confident, I don't know. But I've always felt it. And I haven't thought there is a role I couldn't do. I think principled wise, I've been really blessed to have many colleagues locally, nationally, and internationally that have supported that feeling of being able to address where we are and what we're doing. Whether we're in COVID, Catherine, or whether we're at pottery together. I think we look at the way we work, we share those experiences, and we move forward. And I don't know that I would have told myself, hindsight, I'm leaving Halifax tomorrow and moving here to be any different than we are right now. I know in a way that's person-centered. And so if we're person-centered, it means all persons in the context of practice matter to us. They have value, and that we're inclusive in order to flourish and have healthful outcomes. That wouldn't have been any different. The Erna I live in Kingston is no different than the Erna I lived in Halifax. And I think that my Halifax friends that are here would probably say that I am that same person and that it's not any different. I just get a chance to do it more expressively. And that's what is the ultimate pleasure of this part.
Thanks, Erna.
Thanks.
I'm just going to pick up in the chat, Damon.
Yeah. So Colin Wilson in the chat says, given that we live in a postmodern, safetyist, surveillance, capitalist society, how do you see us growing beyond atomized, alienated, and commodified individuals? What role do you see for humanistic, communitarian socialism in this regard? Wow, that's the hardest.
That, Colin, can that be my dissertation? That's wicked. I'm going to bring it down a little bit, but what I will answer your question, because I do think it's a great question, Colin. I think that in order for us to have a humanistic communitarian socialism, that we need to communicate and build relationships with one another, that we need to be respectful of our differences, that we need to use our voice to have a conversation, and we need to use our ears to listen to another. And one of the greatest challenges that I find is that persons have an opinion or a feeling, but they don't share it. And they don't share it for a variety of reasons. And in order for us to be in this place where we're going to learn to work together and to be together, then we need to find the value behind hearing one another and respecting those differences from wherever they come. And that may not be completely getting at your question, Colin, but it is about finding new/old ways of working together, maybe ways where it's not just voice, maybe it's creativity, maybe it's a different way of self-expression. But I think we need to think about those elements as we learn as a collective to be better persons. If my research is around knowledge translation, so I look at strategies to change behavior of healthcare providers so that they can use research evidence in practice. And every single study I do, communication and relationship comes out as the barriers to working together. COVID hit. What are the things that come out? Communication and relationship, respecting our differences, learning to work with them together. So I think there's a way that we can do it, but I think it requires far more conversation and honesty with each other about how we do it. But Colin, I appreciate your question very much, and thank you. for that.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate your response, and I think you're absolutely right. I think what we really need to move towards as a society, outside of even the domain of healthcare, is the valuing of individuals
Mm.
rather than the valuing of production. And I think that's where we really need strong leadership.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. Carolyn or Caroline, would you like to go ahead?
Hi, thank you for that. Hi, Erna.
Hi, Caroline.
Really nice to see you.
Really lovely to see you.
You talked about the leader that you didn't want to be.
Mm.
I was interested about your inspiration. So I wondered, who or where do you get your inspiration, and how does that play out in your way of being?
I think, isn't that a great question? I've never thought about where I got my inspiration. You know what I think? I think I got my inspiration from Newfoundland. I have spent most of my life being teased because I'm a Newfoundlander. I will hear a joke about being a Newfoundlander. I will hear, one could call it a microaggression, I guess, if you really want it. But I from my grandmothers through to and I'll jump to practice development in a minute, to other persons, it's about believing that we all have a capability. And so from the people that I grew up with, it was always believing that I could do and have that capability. And then what happened, in all honesty, is as I was traveling on my nursing career, I was never going to do anything after my undergrad. And I was never going to leave Newfoundland. And we ended up leaving Newfoundland. And when I was in Halifax, I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to do research when I finally got the research bug that I thought was the research to do. And that was a very positivistic approach. In my doctoral work, I did a randomized controlled trial. And I started that work, and then I read a flyer from Oxford, England, about something called practice development. I had no idea what it meant. I just read it was about CIPI, collaboration, inclusion, and participation, that it was about high support and high challenge, and about how to use evidence. And I thought, well, I must go there. I'm going to figure out what that means. So the sole Canadian, with a lot of people from the UK and Europe, went to a place where I cried a lot. They pushed my thinking. They advanced me and made me scared because they taught me to be me. And I already thought I was me. So where my inspiration has come from is from who I am as a person, from my roots, but it's from all the experiences that I've had along the way that has enabled this. And one of the gifts that I've had with the various critical companions that I've had the pleasure of being with is that those persons have always been there to support. So whether, Caroline, that's a call to you, whether it's one to Maria, whether it's one to Michelle, or whether it's one to Megan or Lisa, those are the things that I go back to. And what I love is that when I connect with persons, and I will, and we are building that here, is that they're forthright with me. And that it's not about saying something that might hurt my feelings, because that's not the intent, but it's to push and to grow me. And I think when we can get that piece out of the way, when we can be okay with that level of feedback, that's when we grow as a provider and a caring community. Thank you, love.
Well, Erna, considering you weren't sure how to answer that question initially, you
getting stuck for words.
Gave a wonderful off-the-cuff answer. So thank you. I'm not sure how to. Is it Jovina? Is that right, or Jovina?
Yes, it's Jovina. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, Erna.
Hi, Jovina.
Hello, everybody from Queens. My question to you, Erna, is professional / personal / scholastic. So I believe in being true to myself, and you have been, an example of that. I refuse to conform into someone's perception, but there comes a point where other people have different ideas of what true leadership is.
Hmm.
So do you think leadership is a relative term? That I think I'm a leader, but some may not think that the qualities I display are
Right.
are like leadership skills. So how would you navigate that without losing yourself in the process?
Great question. So I think that all persons have leadership capabilities. I don't think that all persons are leaders. I think some people are managers, and there's a difference between a leader and a manager. I don't know, I forget the man's name who wrote the book, but for me, a leader isn't in front, a leader is behind. And if you've read the book, Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last, a leader is a person who is there to support the other, but I don't need to own the fame and the glory. I just need to contribute to it. What I do know is that in an administrative role that I'm in, I am open for judgment 24/7. From the glasses I wear, the way my hair looks, whether I have lipstick on or not, or what jewels and clothes I'm flaunting. People do a critique. And I am okay with me. And I think that's the biggest part, Jovina, of being a leader, is if I know who I am and what I espouse, if I'm principled in where I go, I am okay if my style is not another's. I would rather the other say, this doesn't work for me, and navigate a new way of being. I would rather we were a community that works together, that we didn't have a title. We're not quite there yet for that, but I think as a leader, our job is to work with a team, can't do anything without that team, and we find the way to maneuver it together, and I'm happy to guide when I need to, and I'm happy to sit behind. But it thoroughly is a pleasure to have a voice when you haven't always had one, and that's probably the tiniest piece of leadership that is a bit of a bug. It's a bit infectious because it enables you to look after the other and to support them in their growth too. And I hope that answers a little bit for you.
I like that, leaders and managers. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lisa, go ahead with your question.
Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't raise my hand. I guess I'm used to Teams, but thanks so much. Hi, Erna. Great to see you. I have a couple of questions, but something I thought would be really great to talk about, because we've talked about this many a times when our offices were across the hall, and I miss you in that office. The whole notion of agreeing to disagree, or, we often would inevitably get to the same place differently, but there were many times when we would agree to disagree and have a great conversation about that. And often in that discussion we would talk about, not a lot of folks would have these wonderful, compassionate, respectful discussions. Somehow it would be taken as if it was an attack on the person, right, as opposed to a really great discussion. And we would sometimes disagree. And if it was to the place where I was uncomfortable, I'd be knocking on that door saying something. But can you talk a little bit about, how to have that agree to disagree and be okay with that?
Yeah. So I love that, Lisa. And yes, you and I did that quite often. Of course, when I knew I was right, you would always come back a few days later. Totally, just saying. But that's where I think high support and high challenge comes in. I think if we have relationships with other persons when we work together, that I know you have my back. Mm-hmm. When you disagree with me, it's not about you not having my back. It's about you being a human being who has an opinion that may differ from mine. Mm-hmm. What I have respected in those avenues where I can have that depth and breadth of a conversation with another person is that it doesn't become a dismissive, she doesn't like me. Mm-hmm. It becomes we have a different opinion, and that's okay because we're two persons that walk this earth. Mm-hmm. And because I don't have any trouble telling you what's on my mind, when I get to work with another person who's similar to that, where we can engage that way, we grow a completely different relationship.
Yeah. And it's psychologically safe to do that.
Yeah.
Which
And
is,
so if you and I had a disagreement, and guys, by the way, we might have had a few, and she's still a dear friend of mine. Neither one left the other angry.
no.
We just
Never.
left in a difference. But that's also happens too when two people are okay with themselves.
Yeah.
So, and I guess it would be remiss if I didn't say that we put the ego away.
We did and we've talked about that many a times, how the
Yeah.
ego can get in the way of those kinds of conversations. And adding to that was the other piece, since I have you here, I'll say it, that whole piece around self-compassion and self-forgiveness, which I think are really critical. And me as a caring scientist and you as person-centeredness, I think they're really well aligned. But I think that's an important piece of that conversation, as well as to the compassion for the self and being able to forgive oneself, which we are not always quick to do. We can forgive others sometimes,
Right.
but not ourselves, which I
Right.
think is an important piece of that as well.
Yeah, it is. Well, I love to read, and I generally read more than one book at a time. But in one book that I have read, called The Untethered Soul, if anybody has read it, part of it, if I understand myself and I can ground myself in my moment, then I take that time to look at and to consider the other, and to know that when you and I shared, Lisa, what you shared with me was your story.
Mm.
It's not mine. And that means I may not agree with it, but that's okay. And if we can work that way as a community, we can take something and grow it to a place that is exponential. And to put a plug in for Kingston, I'm going to say that's what I find happens a fair bit here. There is a relationship amongst the faculty, amongst the university. There's a relationship with students. There's a relationship with the health center, that people that work together and are even learning to work together as a collective far better than we once did. So when we can reach those things, we can strive at all ends. And it would be remiss of me to not say, I do try to come with a glass half full.
Yeah.
I do try to turn it around. I don't want to talk negative.
No.
Life has negative, but the negative can't stop us from moving forward. If we stop, then we can't change. We need to change. We need to look at things and do them in a different way, not add on, do it in a different way, and find those avenues to move it forward.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, love.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Erna. Erna, Sheena has a question that she wants to talk to you about. Just before that, though, Corrine has a couple of, she asked a question earlier in the chat, but then has kind of followed up, because I think you've partially answered it. Corrine asked, in your leadership position, what communication strategies do you use with individuals who are, well, she says, consistently quite difficult? So you've put your best foot forward, your style, and still you're meeting resistance. Corrine writes, intellectually contrary or rude or dismissive, or having a hard time agreeing to disagree or find common ground. Your answer in talking with Lisa to her question, I think, spoke about that, but I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more before Shayna's question, just to kind of finish off that thought.
Yeah. All right, Corrine, I'm trying to think of the best way to answer, but one of my strategies is not to do with communication, it's to do with breathing. And I've tried to remember when I'm in the middle of that scenario to take a breath, to check in with how I'm feeling before I answer. So Erna, way in the past, her filter was far poorer than it is today. And I just said what was inside of me, and it might not have been very nice. And there may have been a few adjectives in there that I won't use publicly right now. But as I have grown in my leadership and in my person, I try to remember that all of us have some form of trauma. All of us live with a thing in our lives that influences and impacts how we work with one another. And whatever that thing is, it makes a contribution to how we communicate with one another. So if I meet somebody that I am challenged with, then I say to myself, where have they been and what's going on with them to make them speak that way? Because they didn't wake up in the morning and say, today I'm going to be nasty. Like that is not most person's intent. So when it comes across as nasty, something's going on. And as I get older, I'm getting much better at sitting with that. But the style is always to be direct, to use I words, to respond to that person as compassionately as I can, not to have anybody raise their voice, because then I'll stop and I'm not engaging. I've hung up on patients who yelled at me. You don't yell, you talk to one another. And I try to listen. That's hard because I'm not good with silence. So I do try to leave that space. But I think if a person is troubled in their communication with you, something bigger is going on. And I don't have to figure it out in the moment, but I have to be with them in the moment so that we can work through it. And I hope that answers you a little bit.
Thanks, Erna. Love that approach. Shayna.
Hi, Erna. Thank you for this. As you're talking about individual leadership and the importance of knowing who we are, who you are as an individual, and that the leadership comes forth from that and has a natural stability because of that certainty. I also think about this institution that has its own personhood, and it predates and will last after us, but we're catching it at this point in time. And so I wonder, what was your impression of Queen's before you came here? And what did you learn about it that you weren't expecting when you got here? And how do you see the personhood of the institution, knowing who it is, so that it will figure out how to lead in the future?
Wow.
Sorry, that's a multi-pronged question.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, the first one. What did I think of Queen's before I came? I did no thing. I knew it was in Kingston, Ontario.
Maybe that's why you agreed to come.
I'll tell you what happened. I used to sit on a board in Nova Scotia called LOVE, which is Leave Out Violence. And it's for Black and Mi'kmaq youth who have experienced violence and aggression addictions in their life. I was on the board. I was also their camp nurse. My name, by the way, camp nurse, is Easy E. If you guys don't know who Easy E is, bad, that's me. So at camp, there was a young man, his name is Trino. And Trino said to me when he was here at Queen's, he said, oh, Erna, it's white. It's really white at Queen's. That's all I knew about Queen's before I came. And I didn't fully get that until I was here. What I promised myself, Shayna, when I came for my interview, was that I would be me. And so I tried to give the full of me, which can be rather gregarious and too much for some other persons. But I thought if they want to hire me, they're getting me. And I work really hard to pull her back every now and then because she has energy 24/7. My alternate me is Ruby. I'll show you her picture sometime. She's real cute. And I wanted to take all of me and give it to Queen's. What I learned when I came is that it has a huge passion about who it is. It has a lot of rules, like you can't put a bench on your front lawn because you'll break the bench policy. That it's what was culture eats something. It's very driven in that way, but the love of the person here, has a beauty that I just want to be part of. that I would want to take a degree or learn something so I could say that I was a Queen's person. But the biggest lesson I've learned, and the thing that has influenced my personhood that I feel stronger about now than I ever did before, is Jane reminds me that I can't die on every hill. And I'm not over that yet, because that is the name of my book, The Hill I Want to Die On. I'm actually ready to die on every one of them. I realize I can't get to the second one because I'll already be dead. But I think this is about time in life that we do the right thing for all persons. And whatever history Queen's has in a culture, we have radical collaboration in Queen's Health Sciences. And the language that we're using is about how we're going to work together as a community. And I couldn't have a better gift than be able to take a person-centered leadership and bring it into radical collaboration and say, damn it, we're going to work together. So when the time comes that someone says they don't understand nursing, I'll help you. If we don't understand another discipline, then I'll come walk with you. When I did my first shift at the hospital, and one of the nurses said, are you the Erna that works at Queen's? I said, well, let's break that down. My name is Erna and I work at Queen's. Oh my God, that's me. So that's what we are. And if I can take that love of life and bring it to Queen's and have us work together in nursing, in medicine, in rehab, in arts and sciences, wherever we are, then I've been able to take the full of Erna and put her to good use. So I don't think we should judge a book. And I didn't know about Queen's. My goodness, when my husband drove into this city, he'd never been here before. He, on a wing and a prayer, came to a place because his wife got a new job, and he didn't even know the house he was going to live in. So if we can do that, if I can move after being in a place for 29 years and come somewhere else, it can't be bad, wherever it is. We make it grow together. And I am blessed in the School of Nursing to work with a faculty that on a significant percentage is with me. And I couldn't, and alumni, that's exactly the same way. And then a community that's the same way. That's the piece that makes me go, I'm home. And that's a good feeling.
Erna, that's lovely to hear. One thing, as you were just talking in the last moment there, and I see Colin has a question here too, but I did want to give the opportunity for you to talk about your life partner, your spouse, and the jumping in the car, and just the relationship and the mutual support. You and I have had conversations about it. Wondering if you could speak to that a little bit and how it helps you in your leadership.
Oh gosh. So where would I go with that? First of all, I don't even know if he's on the line. So if you are, my darling, here I go. I could do nothing without Craig. And he fills my cup. He believes in me. Oh, I'm such a sook. He believes in me unconditionally. And he loves me that much. He's my polar opposite. I talk, he's quiet. I want to socialize. Oh, I tell you what I said. When I went for my interview with the recruiter, we were online and we were chatting. He said, tell me about yourself. And I said, oh, that's easy. I'm 24/7. And I said, I'm going to a party. He said, you're going to a party? I said, yeah, just work with me. I'm going to a party and Craig is with me. And we go in. Craig didn't want to go to the party. And we go in and Craig looks for the one person that he knows. And that's where he stays all night long. And I go in and go, oh my God, there's a room full of people I don't know. I'm going to meet all of these new people. That's Craig. But he has supported me through every ounce of my school. He has been my strength and my back. We've learned how to grow together. We've worked through, I eat everything and he's meat and potatoes. We have challenged the differences and been together. And The reason those things all work and the reason a relationship, no matter who you're with, works, and it goes over to Colin's question, is because of shared values. Because at the end of the day, what we espouse is similar for the most part. Or we talk about it and negotiate those differences, high support, high challenge again, agreeing to disagree. But if Craig doesn't want to go to a party with me, then I go with myself. That's okay. We find those balances that we do the work together. And when we want to hop on the back of a motorcycle and go to PEI for lobster for supper and come home again, and that's 4 hours from Halifax to Prince Edward Island, then we jump on it and do it. So there's a spontaneity but there's a support in a partnership that helps us grow. And I think those supports, in whether they be marriage or family or friendship or communities that work together, that's the respect that we have for one another that enables us to be a team. And his support has enabled me to be me. And that's really special when you can bring all of that out. So thank you, Damon, for asking me about Craig.
Thanks, Erna. I have a similar reaction when the question is put towards me, how to be able to talk without getting very tearful and emotional.
Yeah.
Laura, you put a question in the chat, and I was wondering if you want to come off mute and ask Erna your question.
Sure. When you were speaking about the right things for all persons. And so my question is, what is the right things for all persons? I often find that there is no right thing for all persons in a lot of situations. So if you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, that phrase I don't think captures exactly what I mean, because the right thing for all persons is the right thing for the person. So right and wrong may not be, that's like saying there's black and white or truth and non-truth, and that's a bit too linear than I want to be. So if I'm going to do the right thing for persons, I do the thing that works best for them. And that may be different and that may be similar. But it's the thing that aligns with their values to help them move forward, or we agree to disagree, Laura, and then we find another way to move forward. So while I may have an opinion about something, which by the way, I do, that doesn't mean I'm right. And if your opinion is different than mine, then we should have a conversation about it. And perhaps I align then with where you are. So I don't mean it in all persons fit into the same commonality, but rather that we're all individuals and what's right for one varies from person to person. But I need to be cognizant of that as I work together. I hope that helps a little bit.
Erna, there's another question from Michelle. Michelle, do you want to come off mute to ask your question?
I do, because I've just realized I've made a typo there, but that I'm sure Erna is going to give me a little bit of ticking off about that. Hi, Erna.
Hi, darling.
I love when you said you are the Erna from Queens, because you are the Erna from more than just Queens for the rest of the world. And I would love you to talk about the international nature of leadership and what you think around that, and, you know, what our similarities are. And
Great question, Michelle. Thank you. I think that it doesn't matter where you live. I think that leadership is because of a person. I think that culture can play a role on it. Culture and context can have a huge influence. But if I look at my international leadership colleagues, I will tell you that I believe that for the most part, the ones that I continue to have a relationship with, we share similar values and virtues, that we share a similar belief in what matters in being person-centered and in moving forward, and that we have awesome conversations about that. And what has warmed me from those beginning days in early 2000 from practice development is that when I got stuck in my own home, so this would have been in Nova Scotia, when I got stuck with feeling not understood, my gift was having others to reach out to across the world. And that being able to do that on a regular basis and then meeting new people along that journey that builds a community of practice that we can move forward and to continue working. And when I know that there are like-minded persons who have those same values and those similar virtues of what matters to us, then there's hope. There's hope for what we're doing, and there's hope for where we're going. And so what I've learned is that I can't live without it. That I know that when I need a Sunday morning phone call to do Brené Brown with you and Maria, that I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and you do your respective times and we talk. And that is the connection that nobody can take away from who we are as persons and in how we work together. But our values, our virtues, who we are as individuals is what's brought us together. And then we discuss that element as we lead together. So it's a gift. That's the biggest outcome for me, that what I've learned, it's a gift to know others. And thank you for asking me, Michelle.
Erna, we've got just a few moments left, a few minutes, and usually we'll go over by a couple of minutes. But on that note, I'm wondering, I've got a couple of notes here from our recent conversation about some other leadership lessons. One of them is about sometimes as a leader, you're alone, or you feel alone, or you have to shoulder tension and conflict as the leader, and sort of that challenge, but that responsibility. We had talked a little bit about that. I wonder if maybe we could talk about that for a few of the last minutes that we have together, because that one, everything positive and working forward, but sometimes there are things that either go in the vault or you just have to shoulder a burden, and it's tough.
Yeah. So for those of you that really know me, I'm not good at being alone. A long time ago when I was challenged with a leader, and she made a comment that if she had her choice, she would be in her cottage by herself working. And it's one of those blurred out moments. I said, oh my God, that's it. That's why I'm not like you. I would rather be in a room with people 24/7. So what have I learned so far in this leadership is that I never knew what it meant to be alone. And I am used to sharing. I am used to talking with others about every decision that I make. And while I say that I don't make decisions in isolation, there are times when I do have to do that. And that's weird. It's weird to be in the middle. It's weird to be in the middle between faculty and students and the dean. And you're crossing a boundary and a chasm of learning to bring people together to work. It's different to work with persons who think just about themselves and not about the whole. And my job is to think about everybody and to know what's happening with everybody, but that's not everybody else's job. And in the times in COVID, as I can use that example, because it's been the majority of my job at Queen's, that's when I have felt the most difficult. So in those alone times, again, for those of you that know me, I write haikus. And I will sit back and I will write something about how I'm feeling. I will cry, and then I'll figure out a way to turn it around and to let it go. So I'm never alone. I'm great company. I can chat away to myself in here 24/7. They were even going to put a silence door here when I came because I'm not that quiet. So alone is not a strong attribute of mine, but being a leader, there are times where you have to learn how to sit with yourself. You have to learn how to be okay with what you're doing, even though others adamantly, vehemently disagree with you. And that's okay. That's okay if I'm principled. And that's okay if I am trying to remember what's doing the right thing. And if I screw it up, then hopefully I harm nobody in that process. Then I take a deep breath and start again. And so being alone or being in the middle, what do I do? When I'm struggling, I find a book to read, always. But there was some really, really good research done about middle management and where you sit in that in between. And how do you learn to resonate with that, and how do you learn to work with it? So I'm learning. I don't think I'll ever get to the place where I have it all, because when I do, that'll be the time for me to leave this earth. But that's okay. As I travel along that journey, I will figure it out. And I'm okay to cry. And I'm okay to do all those things, because when I go to bed at night, I close my eyes and I go to sleep. And so I know I'm okay. And I know that aloneness is not a bad thing. It's just part of this job. Leadership is not a role that a lot of people, if you talk about the challenges that a lot of people want. I'm so glad that Queen's saw me, and that Queen's gave me a chance to work with the awesome people that I work with. And the few that aren't so awesome, I'm learning to figure it out. And if I have a little bit of an answer in my head, then that makes it a little bit better. But the gift of who I get to work with is far better than the alone. And it's far better than the challenges. And it just helps us to grow stronger and be what we want through that change. And it would be remiss if, I didn't celebrate that, it's really awesome being #1 in Canada with COVID. And the only blessing of that being in first place right now is that soon we won't be in first place and somebody will pass us. What a shame. But we're learning again that we can work through that change, that we have those skills because we've done it before, and we're going to take it and we're going to make ourselves even stronger for the rest that lies before us. And that part of leading through change and being a leader, I'm very fortunate to be able to be in the middle of that.
Thanks, Erna. That it seems like a really great way to have us wrap up this hour. I have a couple of notes in front of me, and I will apologize in advance. I'm not trying to make you cry, but you may have some tears before the end of this little 30 seconds I've got in front of me. Erna, I feel like we're singing the same song from the same choir, even though I can't sing and I've never been in a choir. When I hear you speak about how you approach things, it really, lots of things resonate with me. And I just wanted to share some of the concepts that you've spoken to that have resonated with me, and I'm sure with others. Mm-hmm. Person-centered, I'm still continuing to learn about person-centered care and all that means. I definitely have a better sense of that. Communication in relationships, just, when there's conflict, just can we sit down and talk and understand each other? Having understanding that nobody wakes up nasty, as you said. We all have good intentions and sometimes miss the mark, and just sort of talking through it. Sharing your emotions, being honest, the humanistic part of all that we do in care, but also in leadership. Mm-hmm. You didn't say the word serendipity, but there are a lot of things where just, you saw that brochure and all of a sudden you were on a different track, or a complementary track that just kind of took you to another level. Mm-hmm. Filling the well. A lot of things, but the last thing that kind of makes my hair stand up is when you're, having the privilege to talk to you about how, with your dad's illness, and how it's affected your leadership, but more importantly, you as a person and as a family member, and being able to share some of that with you. Mm-hmm. Your dad, and I'm sure your mom and family, giving you the confidence to be Erna, be Easy E. I similarly have been privileged to have just a dad like that too, and I strive to be that kind of dad for my kids and my daughter, so that and so it's wonderful to hear, even though it's wonderful to hear you speak to your dad, about your dad in that way, and really a tribute, knowing that it just so close to your heart, always has been and always will be, but this is an especially challenging time, and I really want to, on behalf of our team, thank you for spending this hour with us.
Yeah.
There's lots of remarks in the chat flying by as I'm just looking at you, and so I don't see them all. I think mostly thank yous. Yes, just wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you. It's my pleasure to talk about something that makes my heart sing. And I'm happy to continue any conversation, but I'll quickly tell you that what my dad used to say and what he said at the night of my wedding was that Erna, she'll go far. She got her mother's looks and my brains. So when my dad died, I made a point of saying in the service that I would go far. And I just keep that in mind because Dad said I would do it. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you, Erna. Everybody, please stay safe with what's going on right now with COVID. I put up January. We have a great speaker for January, Deji Ironrine. This has been great. But yeah, over the next couple of weeks, everybody be careful. It is a tough time, but it's a great time together too. So, and with that, I think we'll say our goodbyes.